On this edition of In Your Interest, we're putting the focus on the all-important BRICS Summit that's taking place in Kazan in Russia, where the India-China bilateral is taking center stage. In a major diplomatic development, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and China's President Xi Jinping are holding bilateral talks on the sidelines of the 16th BRICS Summit in Kazan in Russia. This meeting marks their first formal engagement in 5 years, and it follows India's announcement of a truce with China to resume patrolling in disputed areas along the line of actual control, or LAC, in eastern Ladakh, effectively ending a 4-year-long military standoff. Earlier this week, both leaders met informally during a dinner hosted by Russia's President Vladimir Putin. The two leaders, who arrived in Kazan on Tuesday to participate in the BRICS Summit, had brief interactions only twice since the clash of Galvan in 2020, on the sidelines of the G20 Summit in Bali in 2022 and the BRICS Summit in Johannesburg in 2023. Now remember, China's government has acknowledged the border truce, stating that they've resolved relevant matters and expressed willingness to collaborate with India on implementation. And earlier in the day, Prime Minister Modi engaged in discussions with Russia's President Vladimir Putin and Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian, highlighting India's commitment to cooperation and regional stability. This BRICS Summit comes with a lot of importance, especially considering the thaw in the relations between India and China. And to talk about this further, we have a very special guest joining us on this edition of Indian Interest. We have Mr. Ashok Malik, partner, the Asia Group, and chair of its India practice, joining us. Ashok, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us. I'm going to begin by asking you to talk about the importance of this particular BRICS Summit, especially in the context of India-China relations and the all-important bilateral meeting that's taking place.
No, look, obviously, this is a very important BRICS Summit because this is the first meeting of an expanded BRICS beyond the first 5 members. There were first 4 members, and South Africa was added, and now this is a meeting of the expanded BRICS with partner countries scheduled to be added. And that makes this a historic BRICS meeting. Much has been made about the economic potential of BRICS. Yes, the collective weight of BRICS, if you add the economic weight of each country and put it together, is enormous, because especially with the expansion, it seems quite large. But intra-BRICS trading, intra-BRICS commerce is still limited. It's actually a collation of many bilateral arrangements, much of them dominated by China. China is the biggest trade partner for many of the BRICS countries individually. That has nothing to do with BRICS. That's more to do with China's economic prowess. India and China have a strong trade relationship, though the character of the relationship is changing. We are trying to buy fewer finished products from China and more components and intermediaries, especially for growing manufacturing in India, for mobile phone manufacturing in India, for electronics manufacturing in India. So quite honestly, India-China trade will continue to grow, but the character of that trade needs to be watched very carefully, as India has its own manufacturing ambitions and ambitions to chart a very different technology course from China. In terms of the meeting between President Xi and Prime Minister Modi, yes, the meeting was expected because the two countries have agreed to disengage from the final 2 friction points,
Right,
in Depsang and Demchok in the Ladakh region. Having said that, this is only the first step towards a very long road to normalization of the military relationship at the border. There are still tens of thousands of troops from both sides, from the Chinese side initially and then from the Indian side, who are at the border or near the border and who simply weren't there 4 years ago. So this is the first step, but I wouldn't jump to an ambitious conclusion and say it's back to everything being hunky-dory on the economic front.
right. Before we go any further about India and China, you're talking about the new members of BRICS, like Saudi Arabia and UAE. Talk to us, these two countries are big trading partners of India, and their addition will only further enhance India's positioning in BRICS.
Look, there are 2 separate things here. One, India's economic relationship with the UAE, which is, we have an FTA with the UAE, the IMEC, which is India, Middle East, Europe. That corridor has, of course, been to some degree postponed or delayed because of the crisis in the Middle East and in Israel. But at least the first leg of the IMEC, India UAE, is proceeding very strongly. India, Saudi Arabia, the trade has gone up 10 times since the beginning of the century. The character of that trade is changing. Earlier, India sold only primary products, agriculture products to Saudi Arabia. Now it sells manufactured products as well. So all of that is certainly happening. That's certainly important. The point is that is not that's got nothing to do with BRICS. These are all individual bilateral relationships. So these are part of India's approach to the Gulf and the Arab world, which has been very strongly felt in the Narendra Modi years, because Prime Minister Modi has really had a very ambitious Middle Eastern or West Asian foreign policy. In terms of BRICS, I think what India brings to the table is the idea that BRICS can be, for multilateral reform, for global society, for the global development and narrative and agenda, an important consultative forum. It does not see BRICS as a political or ideological forum. And by bringing in countries from diverse regions, from Africa, from Asia, and we'll have to see with the new process of BRICS partners who could come from even further, from Southeast Asia, North Africa, wherever. In doing this, India is giving BRICS, or attempting to give BRICS, a more wholesome character, a more consultative character, a more diverse character, rather than see it being limited to just one or two agenda items.
All right, and we're talking about this at a time when the India-China bilateral is taking center stage at BRICS Summit. But even as that happens, you have countries looking to reduce their over-dependence on China. For example, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is scheduled for a visit to India this week, and Germany is looking to reduce its over-dependence on China and increase its exposure to India. So talk to us in that sense, even as relationship between India and China is sort of has to go a long way for it to return to normalcy. India is gaining traction.
No, certainly the world is looking to India, and especially to manufacturing in India, with a renewed zeal, a zeal which at least I have not seen in my working lifetime. As you know, the German Chancellor is coming to India very shortly with a large business delegation. And I think what you saw released by the German Foreign Ministry, the India strategy a few days ago, was a reflection of that. Germany and India have been stuck in this negotiation about an FTA, a EU-India FTA, which is a good aspiration but difficult to achieve. However, in terms of supply chain integration, in terms of technology arrangements, in terms of German companies supporting Indian manufacturing ambitions and partnering Indian companies in promoting manufacture in India, in finding a new manufacturing base for at least those commodities or those products or those sectors where India has a strong manufacturing capability. That is certainly something Germany needs to look at much more strongly. Germany overinvested in the China basket and quite honestly has paid for it, because in many sectors, including its automobile sector, it finds German companies, German partnerships now coming back to bite it. And in that sense, India is a more reliable, more trusted partner. It has ambitions to make in India for the domestic market here. It has ambitions to make in India as part of a global supply chain mechanism as well. So yes, certainly the world is looking at India's economic potential with much greater keenness today. India is the world's largest, fastest growing major economy. All of that is extremely important. That certainly adds to India's attractiveness to potential BRICS members as well, because we are a democracy that is growing. We are not a non-democracy that's growing. That makes us attractive to BRICS, but whether BRICS as a collective contributes to Indian growth or not remains to be seen.
Okay, talking about BRICS, some of the other countries in BRICS don't get enough spoken about, especially when it comes to India's ties with them, say a Brazil or a South Africa. What's your view? Because neither Brazil nor South Africa come anywhere close to the likes of Russia and China and the importance of that relationship with India. But India's relationship with Brazil and South Africa has only been growing multifold in the recent past.
Well, Indian companies have strong investments in South Africa. They use South Africa as a base for the broader African continent, because South Africa is one of the more developed economies and cities in Africa. Many Indian companies, the Tatas, for example, have investments in South Africa and beyond. Some years ago when I was in government, I remember traveling to Zambia with the then President of India, and we stayed at the Taj Hotel in Lusaka. Our local telecom service provider was Airtel, and it was a very happy moment for all of us in the Indian delegation. So certainly there is much hope there for both Indian manufacturing, Indian exports, and a resources partnership. In the case of Brazil, and I'd say more broadly South America, if you've noticed in the past 10 or 15 years, Indian investments, the Indian corporate sector and its interest in South America, not just Brazil, but even beyond, have actually outpaced government interest in those in that part of the world. And quite frankly, our diplomacy is catching up with Indian business there. As we work towards our green transition, particularly the use of ethanol in our petroleum products, Brazil's strengths in ethanol, could become very, very important. And there is much we can do together.
Okay, let's then get back to one of the main points of this BRICS summit. It's happening in Russia, and the India-Russia relationship, which has remained rock solid and steady despite so much around it. Talk to us, how do you see the India-Russia relationship and trade between India and Russia progressing from here? Apart from oil, there is so much potential to widen the scope of trade ties between India and Russia.
Yes. Look, Russia will always be important to India politically and strategically, simply because of our neighborhood. Russia and India are, in a sense, neighbors at the eastern end of Eurasia, the Eurasian heartland. And they are very difficult countries and very difficult geographies here. There is religious radicalism in Afghanistan and Pakistan. There are the Central Asian states which have their own challenges. There is Iran. There is, of course, the elephant in the room, or the panda in the room, China. So India will always need Russia to be a balancer in this part of the world, but it would want it to be a balancer. And Russia would want India to give it options as well. So that is taken for granted, irrespective of Russia's responses or behavior at the border of Europe. The fact is, this at the border with Central Asia and South Asia, Russia remains important for us. India-Russia trade has expanded in the past 4 or 5 years as Russia has looked pivoted from Europe after the sanctions and looked to Asia. To be honest, much of the benefits in the short run have gone to China. So Russia uses Chinese cars. So Russia's streets, Moscow streets, have Chinese cars now, whether they had German cars or Japanese cars.
Right.
Russia imports a lot of finished goods from China.
Right.
With India, trade is at $65.7 billion. That was the figure at the end of financial year 23-24. 55 billion of that, a whopping 55 billion of that, is crude oil imports from Russia to India. If you remove that crude oil segment, India-Russia trade has remained flat for the past 5 years, which is unfortunate. However, looking longer term, looking beyond the Ukraine war, as Russia tries to find options to China, which remains its biggest supplier and biggest market in this period, especially for commodities, for resources, for industrial metals, for coking coal, for, of course, crude oil, maybe even gas if the logistics can be worked out, for fertilizers, which we've been importing from them. For all of those, rapidly industrializing India could find use for Russian resources.
Okay,
So
okay.
there is a lot
We will
of,
leave it at that, Ashok Malik, because it is an important point that you're making. You know, overwhelming portion of India's trade with Russia is just oil. A lot can be done, and a lot will be done going forward as well. But for now, Ashok Malik of the Asia Group, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us.